Hello, and welcome to Transformation by Truth podcast, where the called become the chosen, and those who have been dedicated to serve the Most High receive the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as we progress our quest for holiness, perfection, and everlasting life. My name is D.L. Anderson. I'll be your tour guide. Let's get started with today's lesson. Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast and the quest for holiness, perfection, and everlasting life 2022, week 6. Today, we continue with the Redemption series, 2 weeks to examine the process by which we are saved. Today's podcast is Lecture F, a Word of Truth accounting of the redemption process, day 7. The title of today's podcast is Holiness, the Completion of Transformation. Put on the renewed man, which was created in righteousness and holiness and of the truth. Ephesians 4:24. The Lecture F objectives are: prove holiness is the aim of redemption, analyze holiness and standards, analyze the models of physical and spiritual standards, and discuss the bondage that comes with man's traditions. If you're in our virtual book club, this lecture references Chapter 3 of The Pinnacle of Holiness, Volume 1, Holiness is the Main Thing. The first section is entitled, The Aim of Redemption. Holiness is the third and final phase in the redemption process. Whereas salvation is the initiation of the transformation process and sanctification is the focus, holiness is the fulfillment or the completion of transformation. Ergo, the goal, i.e., aim, of redemption is to make us holy, for our Redeemer is holy. 1 Thessalonians 4:2-4 reads, For you know what commands we gave you through the Master Yahushua. For this is the will of Elohim, your sanctification, that you should abstain from whoring, that each one of you should know how to possess his own vessel in set apartness and respect. Not in passion of lust, like the nations who do not know Elohim. For Elohim did not call us to uncleanness, but to holiness. Therefore, he who rejects this does not reject man, but Elohim, who also gives us his set-apart spirit. These verses not only confirm that holiness is the aim of redemption, they also make a very clear warning to those who do not desire to be holy. That is, you are not rejecting me and the word of truth I am sharing. On the contrary, you are rejecting Elohim and faithfully taking yourself out of his will. Trust me, this is a more dangerous act than you might think. The conscious and deliberate act of taking yourself out of the Father's will. And here is why. The word of truth reveals it is not the Father's will that we should perish. Therefore, those of us who submit to his will are not perishing. Quite the contrary. We are experiencing the abundant life here and now, and we are making our calling and election into everlasting life very sure. This is not the case for those who take themselves out of the Father's will, because they don't want to be holy. For when you take yourself out of the Father's will, you forfeit all the blessings and protection that comes with service, stewardship, and ministry. i.e., the three levels of sanctification. This should be clear, for the objective of redemption is to reconcile us to Elohim. There is no other way our former relationship with him can be restored. In no other way we can engage him in the communion he desires to have with his children. Here's a question. If resisting the Father's will set man on the disastrous course he has been on since the beginning, how then shall we be redeemed if we do not submit to his will and pursue holiness? The answer is we can't. Therefore, seeing as holiness is indeed the pinnacle of the Father's will, it is also the aim of redemption, and we will not be redeemed without it. Let's now discuss holiness and standards. Holiness is a divine state of consecration to Elohim, illustrated by one who has been set apart upon completing the appointed spiritual processes required to transform them into the image and likeness of Yahushua Messiah. This rendering of holiness proves it, like salvation and sanctification, is one of the most misunderstood spiritual themes in the religious circuit. The same way many falsely assume they are saved and or sanctified, they also falsely assume they are holy. We know this because these same individuals have not completed the transformation process. At the same time, many believe they are holy due to their adherence to a set of Bible-based guidelines commonly known as standards. Classically, the holiness movement has placed a large emphasis on standards. These standards are considered to be visible evidence the Spirit is residing within you. I know because I am a byproduct of the holiness movement, and I am very well acquainted with their views on standards. For the most part, I don't have a quarrel with this physical model of standards, and that I do agree that how we look on the outside does reflect what's happening on the inside. Yet, although I tend to support a progressive model of physical standards as a physical benchmark of holiness, my quarrel is with the spiritual parallel. Consider this. Although physical standards are a linchpin of holiness churches, the same cannot be said for spiritual standards. Regrettably, these are hardly addressed, if they're addressed at all. I know because in over 20 years, I have never heard them taught, not once in any of the churches I have been in. Now, here lies the problem in a growing hole in the holiness movement that is sadly compromising what was once a spiritually progressive body. That is, physical standards that do not have a spiritual complement or source are not true standards. Rather, they are subjective mandates of conduct handed down by men. Here lies the problem. Namely, any subjective standard is not truth. It's a tradition. And although some traditions are aligned with truth, they can and will never be on the same level as truth. Now, despite this fact, many churches have elevated their traditions to not only be equal to truth, some have made them greater than truth. Here lies the greatest problem. That is, any tradition that is made greater than or equal to truth obviously is not based upon a spiritual standard, for we have been specifically forewarned about the danger of these actions. Matthew 15:1-2 reads, "Then there came to Yahushua scribes and Pharisees from Jerusalem, saying, 'Why do your taught ones transgress the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat bread. But he answering said to them, why do you also transgress the command of Elohim because of your tradition? For Elohim has commanded, saying, respect your father and your mother. But you say, whoever says to his father or mother, whatever profit you might have received from me has been dedicated, is certainly released from respecting his father or mother. So you have nullified the command of Elohim by your tradition. Let's now discuss the bondage and following the traditions of man. In this passage, Yahushua Messiah is making it very clear. Your adherence to man's traditions will, at some point, prevent you from following the will of Elohim. This is because the evolution of traditions is clear evidence that men are adding to the word of truth. Here's a question. What will Elohim do to those who add to the word of truth by creating traditions they were not spiritually licensed to create? The answer, he will add to them all the plagues assigned in the word of truth. Revelation 22:18 reads, for I witness to everyone hearing the words of the prophecy of this book. If anyone adds to them, Elohim shall add to him the plagues that are written in this book. Deuteronomy 4:2 reads, do not add to the word which I command you, and do not take away from it, so as to guard the commands of Yahuwah your Elohim, which I am commanding you. Deuteronomy 12:32 reads, all the words I'm commanding you, guard to do it. Do not add to it, nor take away from it. Proverb 35:6 reads, every word of Eloah is tried. He is a shield to those taking refuge in him. Do not add to his words, lest he reprove you and you be found a liar. And we know where all liars are going in the end. Now, following the traditions of man will not only lead the Father to add all the plagues upon you, it will also lead you into bondage. Remember, only truth can set you free. Thus, the opposite is also true. Traditions can only lead you to bondage. This may seem unlikely, but I assure you it is true. We know this because of what is really happening when men begin following the traditions of men. That is, their hearts began to depart from Elohim, for their confidence now is in men. Jeremiah 7:5-6 reads, thus said Yahuwah, cursed is the man who trusts in man and makes flesh his arm, and whose heart turns away from Yahuwah. For he shall be like a shrub in the desert, and not see when good comes, and shall inhabit the parched places in the wilderness, a salt land that is not inhabited. These verses clearly reveal the bondage of trusting in man and elevating man's traditions above the word of truth. If you don't believe me, ask the children of Israel if there is any connection between bondage and a curse. Unless you have lived it, you have no idea. Now, if you are in this position, or you know someone in this position, here is what you need to know. The path out of bondage is the same path out of the curse. That is, trusting in Yahuwah Elohim and standing on the word of truth, no matter what men may say. Jeremiah 7:7-8 reads, blessed is the man who trusts in Yahuwah and whose hope is Yahuwah. For he shall be like a tree planted by the waters, which spreads out its roots by the river, and does not see when he comes, and his leaf shall be green, and in the year of drought he is not anxious, nor does he cease from yielding fruit. I trust this is the man or woman you desire to be. If this is so, the refrain of this series remains the same. You must be holy to be redeemed. Still, there is much to be addressed concerning the conflict between truth and traditions, and I will discuss these in tomorrow's podcast as we continue this argument. By the end of it, you will not only understand why you will need to rid yourselves of man's traditions, you will understand why you will never be holy if you don't. Now, here is the final word. Holiness is not only about what you pursue, it's about what you take out of your way. As ironic as it sounds, some of the greatest threats to holiness are standards, i.e., traditions that men have handed down to men to keep on an equal or greater playing field as the Father's will. For in many cases, men are holding fast to the traditions of their churches and ignoring the commandments of Elohim. What folly! It is not man who determines if you will have everlasting life or endless death. It is Elohim. Thus, why are so many following inconsequential men and resisting the judge? My dear friends, take my advice and don't resist the judge. It will not end well for you if you do. Now, here is today's assignment. Pray earnestly about the word of truth you have heard today, and ask the Father to prepare your heart to receive the remainder of what remains on these matters in tomorrow's podcast. And here is what's next in this series. We just completed today's podcast, Holiness, Completion of Transformation. And tomorrow's podcast is Holiness, Traditions, and Truth. Now, if you are a member and have questions, please click the Q&A box underneath the video player. Likewise, if you have comments you want to share with the group, please share those in the comment box located beneath the Q&A box. Now, if you're not a member, you have questions about today's podcast, feel free to contact us via our website at www.pinnacleofholiness.com and use the form on our contact page, and we will respond to you as soon as we can. And thank you for being with us today. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Remember to tune in with us every Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And if you haven't already, visit us at www.pinnacleofholiness.com and make sure you sign up to join the quest for holiness, perfection, and everlasting life 2022.